started with our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Lozano. Dr. Lozano has over 18 years of experience in the field of gerontology with a focus on geriatric psychiatry. Dr. Lozano is currently an assistant professor of gerontology at Ashford University. In addition, she is a member of the Gerontology Society of America, American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, National Association of Social Worker, and Sigma Phi Omega. Dr. Lozano is the current board chair of the Alzheimer Association, Bay Area Agency on Aging, Christian Senior Services, Long-Term Care Coalition, Not Forgotten Coalition, and currently is a member of the Task Force Against Elderly Domestic Violence. So please let's welcome Dr. Lozano.
You know what, I just realized I can't see the screen, so I'm going to move over here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, can everyone hear me, or this better?
That's better.
Okay, because I have a tendency to get really loud, especially when I start singing. I have a bad knee today, so I'm going to be sitting. Actually, so I want to make sure everybody can see me, or at least hear me. So hearing me is the most important anyway, so I'm good back there, Joe. So today we're going to talk about managing behaviors. I think that's what the slide she has on, right?
Dementia.
Dementia. Okay, good. So I have this guy up here because I think sometimes we're really not sure how all this comes about. And we all need to understand, first of all, that the reality is that you don't get old and get dementia. The dementia is not something that happens to every single person. But somehow we get to a point as we start to get older, or we work with people that have dementia, that we start to believe that somehow this is going to happen to us. And those behaviors can be so bizarre and so complicated and so confusing that sometimes we feel we're working with somebody like Frankenstein, I guess, in some regards. Somebody that somebody else created. We're not kind of able to manage this. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I like to talk about this wheel of life only because I'm very proud of myself that I figured out how to put these little pencils up here. That's really the only reason I have this particular slide. It's because I like these pencils. But we'll kind of go from there and figure out what I'm particularly talking about. And the reason we need to kind of figure that out is because it's going to be different for every single person in this room. And the people that you work with, your loved ones, or if you're a professional caregiver, the people that you work with, we all experience this wheel of life. When we start to get involved in life and we become adults, at whatever age that might be, and for some of us, you know, it takes a while for that to happen, especially the maturity part. But as we become adults, we're connected to society in many different ways. We're connected to our family, that makes us part of society. Might be connected to church, to friends, to neighbors, to, you know, your college friends, to your high school friends, to your community, connected to pets. How many of you have pets? So when we say we're connected to pets, each of you that raised your hand knows exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? So actually I just had to put my cat down of 10 years a couple of days ago, and so I found myself, you know, those things are hard, but you know, I guess it's just a part of owning a pet. The responsibility you have to take to kind of make those decisions. But I won't make y'all be my therapist right now. We're not going to talk about my cat, Uma. So you decide that for yourself. So as we grow older, those connections get stronger. As you have a family, if you have kids, our connection to the grocery store. When people say, why do you mention grocery store? I said, we're all connected to the grocery store. We all have to get to the grocery store. We all have to get to the Valero or whatever those little stores are now that you might have around here. We're connected to that because we have to put gas on our vehicles. So there are certain things that we're connected to that are important to us. I had an older woman just 2 days ago tell me, she said, she seemed to be kind of off thinking about something. And I said to her, what are you thinking about? And she said, I'm thinking about the days She lives in a nursing home. She said, I'm thinking about the days I used to go to this really great steakhouse. I'm thinking about that steak and that baked potato and that big glass of tea. And I thought, that's what she's thinking about right now. How long it has been that she has gone to her favorite steakhouse. It was that place, she said, that was like connected to a foreign country. She said they have them in all these big cities. She's talking about Outback. And so I thought that was kind of cute. So now, here are some of the things that I just mentioned. Those connections, we have ourself in the middle of that. As we start to grow older, we look at that transportation, our job, our finances, they decline as you get older. For some people who are lucky, who actually save money, it might even get higher, or at least kind of maintain. But for the most part, for most of us, those might decline a little bit, 20%, 30%, some even more. So we're moving along in life, in the wheel of life, and everything is going really well, and then all of a sudden, we get to a point in our life where we start to lose those connections. For whatever reasons, we lose them. We don't know what, it could be through death, it could be because we moved, it could be because someone else moved, it could be because we no longer have that strong connection or ability to get to that. But look what's something that I think is very important here that's missing, and that's church. If you think of someone who's living alone and has dementia, you can only begin to imagine these things. For those people that are telling you, I'm not moving, I'm not getting out of this house, there's nothing you can do, the sheriffs and all his deputies is going to have to move me out of here, I'm not moving. That connection is missing to those other things. So who do they increase that level of connection to that they have? And not necessarily in a positive way, but if they still have their pets, if their pets, or they're hoarding pets, or whatever the situation might be, their friends and neighbors are still around, but even those people have kind of begun to move around a little bit. And what people need to understand about aging is these losses that begin to occur for all of us as we grow older are truly, truly significant. We don't think about those losses because you're experiencing them every day. If you imagine yourself in the morning waking up and all the things that I just mentioned here are gone. Everything. Your access to them, your ability to have them, they're gone. Imagine what that would be like for you. Some of you, for a brief moment, not being able to have to deal with your kids might feel some little relief for like 15 minutes. But just for a minute. But think about what that means. Well, we try to tell seniors that are still very active, I try to tell them, try to bring these back in your life somehow. Make new friends. Volunteer, do whatever you need to do to kind of increase some of that. But someone with dementia who loses these things and doesn't have the ability to regain them, their level of depression and anxiety and frustration and anger begins to exacerbate, begins to increase. And these are some of the things that you're going to particularly see. Now, what begins to happen here, if you see this right here, that's what I do with my cats, that's right there. But if you see this here, you can see the self. Look how much bigger it's gotten. You see the size of it here? Look how much bigger it's gotten here. And look how much bigger everything has gotten. Because now, this becomes the focus of this person's life. It's all about their pets. It's all about their family. It's all about their friends and the neighbors, or their home if they're still living at home. But once they're taken out of their home and maybe living with you, it all changes. And once the self begins to get bigger, that's what they begin to focus on. And especially once the pets are gone now, and the family and neighbors, they moved away, and you know what? It's just you and them. I feel like we need like a Twilight Zone kind of music in the background now when we talk about that. It's the same thing that happens in the empty nest syndrome. A married couple moves along and their kids move on, they go to college or they get married or they get jobs and they move away from home, hopefully. And all of that kind of begins to happen, and now there's an empty nest syndrome, and now there's this couple looking at each other like, who are you? And what am I supposed to do with you? We've not been a couple in so long. You've been mom, I've been dad. We don't recognize each other as a couple anymore. At one particular point in our life, I thought, I romanticized you, we went on dates, all that's gone. I don't remember the last time we went on a date without 7 children or 3 children or 1 child or having to get back home. You have to kind of redevelop that. But that's another talk we can talk about later. But it begins to change. So now let's look at some of the things that begin to happen. Now you might wonder to yourself, why did she go from that really kind of cool discussion to start talking about this kind of stuff? Because in order for you to understand the older person, dementia or not, healthy or not, brain healthy or not, you have to understand what is happening to someone as we grow older. We know kind of what's happening to us ourselves physically. You know, you slow down, the gray hair and the gray hair, and all of that kind of starts to happen for us, you know, the wrinkles. But see, those are all the kind of things that I'm really proud of, because what it shows for me in my life growing older is that I'm making it. That I really am moving forward. Now remember, you know, something that I think is important to know, not remember, but to know, is that I had the privilege of growing up with a very strong grandmother. I grew up with my parents, but my grandmother lived next door to me. Now first let me ask y'all a question here. Does anyone think they're related to me? My last name, my maiden name, I'm not married, is Lozano. My mother's maiden name was Martinez, and my father's maiden name was obviously Lozano. I just want to make sure that there's no relatives in here, because I don't want you to say this stuff to anybody. Raise your hand if you think you're related. If you don't think you're related to me, then I'll go ahead and tell you about my family. Now, it's important to keep in mind, when I grew up next door to my grandmother, she was the oldest of 21 children. Oh. Yeah. And she raised her own 4 children, my mother being one of those, on her own. And she divorced my grandmother, my grandfather, which was almost unheard of back then. But she, at the age of 15, married my grandfather, who was 31. Okay, you know the stories, you know. And so she divorced him, and she was an incredible woman. I remember the first time as a 4-year-old child, she and I were like this. But as a 4-year-old child, she used to tell me, send me home when she was going to kill a little goat for dinner, cabrito. She never wanted me to see it. But I started thinking, you know what, I'm going to see what she does in that garage. Because she walks from the house to the backyard with a really big knife. I got to see what she's doing. So my cousin Renee and I, we went running around, and we snuck around. That was back then, we could run around. My mother would say, get home before dark. That was like, you were 4, your mother didn't care where, you know, she knew you were somewhere in the neighborhood. And nobody was going to hurt you and kill you and do terrible things to you. Anyway, I sound like I'm 150, but, you know, I tell people I'm 101, so they go, God, you look great. I'm like, I know. Don't I look good for 101? That's what you got to start doing, telling people like 30 years older. They're going to tell you, oh my God, how are you walking? Your brain's so good. You're still working. I'm still working. Look how good I look. I'm great. Anyway, so my cousin Renee and I went to the back, and there was my grandmother. She put a bandana on her head, and she had her apron on, and she had a towel, I call them cup towel thrown over her shoulder, and she had that big knife. I didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't tell me. She just told me to go home and not to go back there. But I did anyway. So we went back to the garage. It was an old wooden garage. It had holes everywhere. So my cousin Renee went back in there, and she did her thing. And those of you who have killed a cabrito know it's not pretty, especially when they're alive and you kill them. This little bitty goat. Of course, you know, I almost passed out. I threw up on the side of the thing. My cousin Renee thought it was the coolest thing he'd seen since sliced bread. I was just sick to my stomach. I couldn't stop crying, and then here comes my grandmother. She hears me. She comes around the back. I thought she's going to stab me with that knife. And this is it. I'm going to die with cabrito right there. And she said, we do this because this is how we're going to take care of ourselves. This is how we eat. We're not going to lose any part of that meat. I saw her pray to it. She explained to me what she had done. Years later, at the age of 95, my grandmother died in a terrible fire at a board and care facility. She had Alzheimer's. But the point was that I had an unbelievable amount of time that I got to spend with her and got to know who she was. I got to spend a tremendous amount of time with her, despite the Alzheimer's that she got later on in her life. And really did everything I could to kind of get to know her. She had decided very early on, she told my mother, I want my granddaughter when she grows up to work with old people. I was 3 days old when she told my mother that at the Nix Hospital when I was born. I was 3 days old when she told my mother that. And she put the spell on me, and here I am. She was a curandera too, so I think there was a little something going on with that. She made it happen. So my commitment to this population and to working with caregivers, and I myself now are not a primary caregiver, I'm a secondary caregiver to my mother, but still experience so many of the things that some of you experience and do everything that I can, and having been somewhat of a caregiver to my grandmother as well. I think that it's important to understand the whole relationship that you had with that individual person. Understand it in a way in which only you understand it and know about it. If the relationship, and it was mentioned earlier in the talk by Dr. Oakes, if there's anything shaky going on, and every single person in this room knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. If there's anything shaky going on, take care of it. Go and talk to somebody, go and see someone, go and manage it, and decide for yourself at that time if you're not the best person to be doing what it is that you do. That's why my mother doesn't live with me. She didn't want to, first of all. She tells everybody I'm her older sister now. And she says it's a dementia, but I think she does that on purpose. But the thing is that this is what my mother wanted, not necessarily me. She wanted to live my brother, who's the king of the family, the coins on the floor, the sun shines on him, the moon sets behind him. Hispanic, youngest male in the family, only male. It's Jesus, John F. Kennedy, and a picture of my brother in the living room. That's how it works. How many of you know what I'm talking about? There you go. So, now we have to start all this stuff that we know about growing older, all this stuff we know about the stuff between the relationship between you and that parent or that grandparent or that spouse, whoever it is you're taking care of, and now all of a sudden you're dealing with this. And you still you have to decide, how much baggage am I going to take with me into this new relationship that I have with this person? Are you going to take 5 or 6 or 7 bags of luggage? Those rolling ones and some couple of things thrown over your neck? What are you going to take with you into that relationship, into that new experience? Or are you just going to try to take just a little overnight bag? I always say, learn to pack your baggage the way men pack their baggage. I mean, men can throw a toothbrush, underwear in an overnight bag or a pillowcase, and they're gone. If we can learn to minimize our bag, how many men agree with that? And some men are like, no, I'm not like that, because I got too many hair products. But if you don't have hair products, and like 7 different colognes for every day, for the most part, or some really different color underwear for each day, then you can kind of move from there. So now what it is, you got all these things that you can contend with, and this is the things people don't think about. You think it's just about this stuff right here, but it's not. It's about everything else that I just mentioned and more. Because we haven't talked about personality yet. And that's a whole different ballgame, and we're going to talk about personality. So, now you're dealing with these functional losses, grooming, inability, they don't want to bathe, their willingness to bathe. They don't want to get dressed, or they try to get dressed on their own. Their gait and their mobility, the way they walk, and the slowness behind it, you know they're going to fall any second. The minute you turn around, any second that person is going to fall. That's got to be one of the scariest things that you have to ever start contending with at that particular point. And then you have a person with dementia who starts cussing you out when you try to get them to do any of these things. And then the person who's cussing you out is the very person that you've been arguing with since you were 2. And all of a sudden, if that is your parent that you're taking care of, you turn into a 10-year-old. All of a sudden, the parent sees you not as the 30 or 40 or 50 or 60-year-old person that you are. They see you as the 10-year-old who runs around the house who doesn't know anything. I have a PhD in gerontology, a master's degree in gerontology. I've been working in mental health and aging for over 18 years, and my mother said, you don't know nothing. You don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like because I'm not experiencing the same things that you're experiencing, but I don't know what it's like. It's like that comedian George Lopez talks about it. It's the person with the vest in the family who knows everything. That's the person the target worker. It's, you get to see it to understand what I'm talking about. But those of you who know, I saw you laughing, so you knew what I was talking about. So just the communicating and writing and all the things that writing, when they're writing checks at very beginning and they don't want to give that up. My gosh, this is the one thing I think they would give up someone cutting out their heart before they give up a checkbook. Cut out my heart. And then when you say, why don't you do this? Why don't you pick one sibling in the family, one of your children, and let them be the one that you trust the most. Let them be the one. All of a sudden they trust no one. But they're buying stuff they shouldn't buy. People are coming to the door selling them stuff. They're writing checks for too much, or they're not writing checks at all, and all kinds of terrible things are starting to happen, and they become more and more vulnerable. Then there's more behaviors we have to start dealing with. Irritability, besides our own irritability that we have to start dealing with. Because remember, a lot of these behaviors are not necessarily just their behaviors, but there are behaviors too. Because you don't always have a good day. They don't always have a good day either. Just because they have dementia doesn't mean they wake up having a good day. People with dementia have bad days because they're still human and they don't really feel like they're having a great day that day. I mean, all of those things can particularly happen. For me, I haven't had a great day since the Cowboys have become the Cowboys. Since Tom Landry left, that's what I tell people. Agitation, anxiety, pacing, we're going to talk about how to manage some of these. This kind of reduced tolerance for stress, what does that mean? One of the first parts of the brain to be affected by dementia is the frontal lobe. What does the frontal lobe mean? You should have already heard this. It impairs our judgment. Our social skills are impaired. So you're trying to talk rationally. Come on, Dad, pick this up and put it on. It's your shirt. You're trying to tell an irrational person to do something rational. And you're thinking to yourself, I don't understand. Why won't he do it? Why does he keep cussing me out? He keeps cussing you out because he's embarrassed that he can't do it. He's embarrassed by it. He's embarrassed that you're standing in front of him, watching him undress or watching him try to get dressed. You just finished bathing him. You try to do it where you can do it with a lot of respect, but he's embarrassed by all of that. So now you have these underlying features of all the things that this individual person has just lost, and you're trying to get them to put their shirt on, and they're embarrassed. And they're angry, and they're upset, and they've lost their independence. So it might just mean you might just need to take a second away from that. One thing that I learned recently when my mother stayed with me at my house, I could not get her to put on her slacks correctly. She had them wrong, and I knew she was going to have problems walking. So I said, Mom, your slacks are turned around. No, they're not. Well, I said, okay. I think that the tag, is there a tag? And she looked, she goes, yes, but that's where the tag goes. And then I said, okay, now remember, I'm not a gerontologist when I'm working with my mother. I'm just Yvonne. To my mother, I'm 12. Actually, I was 10. I'm 12 now. She's given me a couple of birthdays. I'm growing up a little bit. So I said, here, let me show you. So I took off my slacks. And I said, I think it goes this way. And she said, oh, so she takes hers off and puts hers on correctly. Now I thought, I can't do this like an HEB. But you know why it worked? Because I had read this article that reminded me that dementia, I'm not telling you to get naked in front of people, but if you need to, if your spouse, go ahead and do it, but just be careful how many people are in the room. But I'm just saying that sometimes they mirror your behavior, so sometimes if you show them, they'll mirror your behavior and copy what you're doing. You have to be very creative. That's why we have talks like this with the Alzheimer Association, so that you can come in here and learn some of these techniques Are every single one of these things going to work perfectly for you? Absolutely not. Because I don't know the personality of the person you're dealing with. I don't know the mood they're in that moment when you're dealing with them. If they're agitated and they're irritable and they're pacing and they're anxious, I can tell you right now, it's not a good time to try to get them to take their pants back off and put them on right. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to wait. So they're going to be resistant to care. How many of you know what that means and you've experienced it with the person you're caring for? Absolutely, they're resistant to care. Now, remember, it's an irrational behavior, but they're not understanding what it is you're trying to tell them to do. So you need to try to be patient with it. Although, the last time I think I did this talk, I was having difficulty in getting my mother to bathe, and a week had gone by. And I got this letter afterwards from a caregiver who wrote me a private email, and she said to me, she said, by the way, at the very end, she gave me this really nice letter, and she said, at the very end, she said, my mother goes a week sometimes without taking a bath too. So I think that, I'm not saying that that's always okay, but sometimes you just have to be okay in the moment. Now she wants to get into, I don't understand, but she wants to take a shower all the time. I don't know what happened, but I'm fine with that. She's jumping in there and she's happy. That's great. I'm not complaining. So the more increased stress there is, the more stress you have, the more stress they're going to feel. The more stress they have, the more stress you're going to feel. Think about that. Now, wouldn't the world be a much better place if everybody did everything we ask them to do in life exactly the way we say it? Our friends, our co-workers, our children, our animals, your spouse, and your spouse. I mean, wouldn't that just be a wonderful life? We'd all be kind of bored by it, though, because everybody's doing what we say. If everybody ran their lives and led their lives, but it's not going to happen that way. And I can tell you right now, the one person it's not going to happen to is someone you're trying to work with dementia. Remember, they're in a world of their own. They have a mind of their own. And you have to truly understand that. But you also have to understand yourself and your own emotions and how you manage stress. So, increased anxiety, waking up in the night. Look at all these. Catastrophic behaviors, we'll talk about some of those later. Sundowning, how many of you experience someone who's sundowning? Sundowning is very common. Purposeful wandering, confusion, agitation, combative behavior, diminished reserve. Now let me tell you, I want you to look at everything except these two. I want you to, and I'll make it three, make it these three. Look at catastrophic behavior in these four. You know what research shows? The number one reason that these behaviors can occur or triggered, not necessarily, obviously they're occurring because of dementia, is boredom. Now, I got a really bad case of bronchitis a few weeks ago, and I got it for like 12 days. I have asthma too, so it was really made it worse. So I was like in bed for 14 days. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I was so bored. I mean, I love movies, but you can only watch so many. I like old films, like black and white films. You can only watch Gunsmoke so many times. Twilight Zone. I mean, you can only do that for so long. I can only read for so long. I mean, you just have this sense that you're just going crazy. You want to get out of the house and you can't. And then I started thinking about someone with dementia. Now, just because they have dementia, you think, well, they don't remember. But their body does. Their body does remember that. Biologically, their muscle memory remembers that. Working in the geriatric psych unit the next years ago, we had patients who were farmers, engineers, plumbers. Those people, men or women, would constantly be looking for something to do. People would say, oh, he won't quit wandering. He's looking for something to do. That's the other thing to start to think about. With my mother, when she comes over, I have at least 2 baskets of towels and a basket of socks to fix. And then she complains to my brother that I gave her work. Every time I go over there, she never has her clothes done. She has them laying around. I have to take, whatever. I mean, you know, it took me a while to get over that, but I had to get over that too. I had to quit washing dishes because she does not know how to wash dishes anymore. So it's really bad. She says, I don't know how, but I think it's her. So all of these things are also more likely to occur as the stress increases. If your stress level is high and their stress level is high, so let's talk about what we know. How many of you know what makes your stress level go up? Raise your hand if you know what triggers you. I know you know. Raise your hand. Besides parking and traffic and bad drivers and your children, raise your hand if you know what stresses you out. Okay. Hear what I'm saying now. If you're having one of those days where if Mother Teresa came into your house and talked to you and you yelled at her, you knew that that's like the bad day for you. If you were even going to yell at Mother Teresa, that is like a bad day. That is not a good day to be working with a person that has dementia. So, if you don't have the support you need from family or friends to come in and just give you 2 to 3 to 4 hour break, then call the Alzheimer's Association and talk to them about respite care. Call someone and talk to them about respite care. Now I'm not going to stay on this very long because I know I'm probably going to run out of time here because I think I have like 85 slides, but we'll go from there. I just like to be prepared. I mean, if there's like a tornado or something, we'd have more time. But, not that y'all would stay here for it, but in case you did. But I think that, you know, we need to be prepared to be able to address those days that it's not a good day for us to be doing this. Now, here's 2 things to keep in mind. And this is going to be hard for y'all to understand. There are other people out there who can do what you do. Do you believe that?
Yes.
How many of you don't believe that? Because a lot of people think they're the only ones who can do it that good because the person they're caring for says, I don't want anybody else in here, I just want you. Remember, irrational behavior. Because if the situation was turned around, he or she would probably be thinking the same thing. Irrational behavior. People say, well, you know, no one's going to love him or her the way that I do. Of course not. But there's going to come a point where you're going to quit loving them because you're going to get tired of it. That's not true, but I'm just saying that, you know, you're going to get to a point where you're not going to like that person very much. And imagine taking and managing some of these behaviors when you cannot stand the person you're taking care of one more second. That's the truth. I'm not holding back on that. You're like, I love you, but I don't like you. You can love somebody and not like them for a particular moment. Those of you who have been married or have significant others know what I'm talking about. You can love someone and not like them. You have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? That's why we have pets. Because we can always love them and like them most of the time. So now here's some of the sources of stress. Not only for you, but for the person you're caring for, fatigue. But for the person you're caring for, look at the ones underneath. This is really, really important. Noise and confusion. Come on, let's take mom to so-and-so's 4-year-old birthday party. It'll be good. She'll be with all the kids. At this, she's like going, no, I'm not doing that again. She gets agitated. You bring her home for it's too much confusion. They can't figure out what's going on. They're trying to recognize people. Some people they don't. It's too much. Too many people in a room. Let's have Thanksgiving at my house because mom can't really get out. Oh my gosh. First of all, you're the main caregiver at the home. You have no business doing Thanksgiving at your house. First of all. And just because you're home, you have no business babysitting your grandchildren. Why? I say this. Okay, you babysit your grandchildren. But then next weekend, you take whoever it is you're taking care of, and you take them to your adult child's house. I took care of your kids, you're taking care of grandma. I took care of your kids, you're taking care of your father. I took care of your kids, let's make a deal, you're taking care of me. What am I doing? I'm going back home, shutting the door. I'm not home, I'm just going to do nothing. Do whatever you want. Take care of yourself. Now here's the deal. You talk to caregivers and they tell you how much stress they're under and what's going on. I'm one of them. I do the same thing. I talk about it all the time. It's very stressful. I think about it all the time. I wake up thinking about it. I wake up worrying about it. I do it all the time. And I know all the resources. And I'm still stressed out of my mind. Why? Because I'm not using the resources. Because I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. I'm adding more stress to my life. So now I have to think about these things. The multiple competing stimuli, noise, confusion, television, radio, too loud. The radio, make sure it's music that they enjoy. Maybe they're going to get tired of it. Think about it. What can it be? Too many people around. Too many things going on at once. Here, take your pill, take your medicine. Here's this, let's do your breathing treatment. Oh, here's this, here's your newspaper, here's your food, eat, I'll be back. That's way too much. We're a generation right now of people who likes to multitask. Right? We like to multitask. We like to do a bunch of things at one time. Whether you feel like it's stressful or not, it is creating a tremendous amount of stress to you physiologically and neurologically. It is not a healthy thing to be doing. It's important for us to focus on one thing at a time. I'm not talking about work, because at work you might have to multitask. But when you're at home, try to do one thing at a time. That was my New Year's resolution, to start focusing on one thing at a time and finishing it, and not putting it off so I can do something else. It's working like 20% of the time, but I'm getting there. I'm going to be up to more than that at the end of the year. So if you try to give them things thinking it's going to distract them, it's not. For that person, it's too confusing. So when you're bathing them, I don't recommend that you have loud music going on or whatever the situation might be. You need to just make it a very focus on that project and leave it like it is. Illness, think about physical stress that they might be experiencing. Maybe they're having side effects from the medication. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're thirsty. You know what kind of eating habits they had before they got the dementia. Think about those eating habits again. Maybe they don't like what you made them. Maybe that's a dish they don't like. I'm not saying make special dishes just for them, but if you can remember what their favorite foods were, try to have that every once in a while. Their favorite snack was maybe peanuts or something like that, give them that. Maybe they're thirsty. We forget to give them water. They need water. Some more water than probably what you're thinking. So think about that too. Have there been any changes with the caregiver routine? Has anything changed? This is so important as they start to progress through the disease. I would say somewhere in the middle till toward the end is they need structure. And y'all probably already know that. The more structure and consistency you give them, the less likely they are to start to kind of get out of whack. Because anything that's outside of that structure is going to cause them quite a disruption. They're going to become more and more agitated. Now here's the other thing I tell people. I started thinking about that. Because even now when my mother comes to stay at my house for a week or so, or a weekend, she knows the routine around my house. She gets in there and it takes her a little while, but she'll figure it out. But if I do anything different, then she becomes, I can tell her she gets a little bit nervous about it. I can tell her anxiety level starts to increase. So I try to keep it very simple. There are certain things that she likes to do. My mother was, she loved to read, so I try to, do that for her. I try to read for her. I talk to her about books. She loves old movies. She loves novellas. Yeah, we have to watch those, even though she has no idea what's going on with them. And sometimes she thinks it's my family members that are doing that stuff, and she gets them confused. But that's okay, because we kind of, do that together. And she likes to play dominoes, and so we play dominoes a lot, and cards. So I think really some of those things that you can start to think of to bring into their routine is important. Because anytime you can get kind of blood flowing in their brain, just because they have dementia doesn't mean it's not time anymore to make blood flow to their brain. You got to try to help them do some of those things. And these are ways to kind of manage it. But the other thing is that think about how you're talking to them. Because when someone has attitude with you, do you know it? When someone's angry with you with their voice, do you know it? Or when they're sad, you kind of know it. They know it too. It's real easy to not change how we're reacting to them because it becomes habit for us. It becomes habit. I like to think that sometimes we, as caregivers, those of you who care for them on a daily basis, you're their prosthetic device. You're the very thing that supports the person of what she or she is or isn't able to do. That's what your role is. Now, in the memory crutch issue, where you're kind of feeling that role of being in the memory crutch, you don't have to finish every single one of their sentences they finish because you can't wait for them to get there. You don't have to do that because does that agitate them sometimes? Of course it does. And you're taking a deep breath and going, oh, here we go, I know. And my mother's doing this thing now. She'll pick this up and she'll say, could you bring me another fork? This one's not working. And I'm like, first of all, it's not a fork. And that's what I'm thinking in my head. But of course, I'm not going to say that to my mother. I'm like, sure, I'll get you another fork. So I bring her a fork. And the other day she said, can you bring someone over my house to cut my grass? And I'm thinking, I have to think, okay, she doesn't live at home anymore. She's not talking about my brother, even though I don't think he ever cuts his grass. I think she wants a haircut. Because I looked at her and I'm like, she needs a haircut. And my mother used to be a beauty shop lady. She'd go every Friday. So those beauty shop ladies, they still. So I'm like, okay, we'll go do that. So we got in the car. A couple hours later after dinner, we went and got her haircut. She never brought up getting the grass cut again. I didn't argue with her and say it's a haircut. You mean a haircut? Why don't you just say haircut? Why don't you just say haircut? Your lawn is not your hair. I mean, that's what you're thinking in your head, all this sarcastic stuff. I mean, because you just finished answering the same question 500 times. Can I help you do that? Can I help you do that? Can I help you do that? Let me help you do that. You want me to help you do that? Can I help you do that? No, you can help me do this. So I give her something to do. Did I tell you your Aunt Dina called? Did I tell you your Aunt Dina called? Did I tell you your Aunt Dina called? Did I tell you your Aunt Dina? My mom has not gotten near a phone in a year and a half. Oh, what'd she say? Well, no, I forgot. She tell me again. I mean, so then I say to her later on, I'll say, oh, remember when you were telling me that Trina called? She says, yes. I just help, and that kind of redirects her to start thinking about something else to talk about. I bring up the Aunt Trina thing, which makes her go to another level. That kind of redirects too. That's something you can try. Now remember, when you want to visualize what's happened to them when they ask those same questions over and over, what's happening is like one of those little toy robots from back in the 50s and 60s, where the robot would get caught up against the wall and wouldn't go anywhere else. It just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. And the only way to stop that robot from doing that was to redirect the robot to go somewhere else. That's what you do with the person with dementia. You redirect them to do something else. Now, let's look at warning signs. How many of you, and the person you're caring for, how many of you have warnings? They have warning signs. Let me just tell y'all right now, they have them. Every study, all the years I worked in mental health and aging and inpatient geri psych units, they have the warning signs. They have them. They're there somewhere. They're telling you something. I noticed for a while with my mother, she's not quite incontinent yet, but sometimes when she goes into a closet, she's like, what was I in here looking for? And I'm like, probably the bathroom, and let's go. I mean, I recognize that behavior with her now, that's what she's trying to do. And so those are kind of some of the things you can think about. Irritable motor activity, where they can't really sit still, they start getting a little bit anxious, moving around, there's something going on with them. Now, you may not be at these stages yet where you're starting to see a lot of these behavior problems, but you might be starting to see a beginning stages of them or just some of them. But these are some of the things that you can look for. That rising level of agitation. This is what starts to happen when you're trying to bathe them or dress them or get them to eat or take their medicine and they're not wanting to. These are some of the things that you can start looking at. Humming, glaring in their eyes, and this is some of the more severe, agitated, aggressive behaviors that you may not be experiencing yet, but it could happen as well. Hyper-alert state, I think that's important to mention. You know why? Because I think their hypervigilance that you see with dementia patients is really important to pay attention to. And a lot of you here, especially if you had children, you know what hypervigilance means because you're watching them constantly. Everything that they do. So much of the fact that you aggravate them, that you won't quit watching them. But that happens sometimes with a dementia patient as well. Is that you have hypervigilance for them, which can be agitating for them or they for you. But when they get up to do something and they start piddling, there's something they need to do. Or they're bored. Boredom. Can you imagine? They're still experiencing boredom. Just like you would. Imagine, especially if you don't ever really get out of the house. I'm not talking about going outside to walk down the driveway and get the mail or walking around the house. There's a certain level of boredom that's involved there. Think of something that will catch their attention to get them to do something different. We had this older man who was a plumber in the unit, and we got him a set of plastic tools and a tool belt. He never walked up to the nurse's station again. He went into everybody's bathroom and tried to fix her sink, but he never walked to the nurse's station again and wandered like he was, and he wasn't as agitated. He took that tool belt off, and I'm going to tell you, it was weird, around 6 o'clock every night. And why did he do that? It's when he got off work. Somehow his body still knew that. So you have to try to be creative and kind of find those things. It's a constant engagement with that person to figure something out that they might enjoy doing. My mother's, her hygiene's really poor in regards to dealing with food. That's why she can't touch food anymore. So, but she loved to cook. She was unbelievable. She could make tamales, just unbelievable. Tamales and her enchiladas were incredible. But she can't cook anymore. She ain't cooked toast. But the other day I was cooking and she was like, please let me do something. And I'm like, okay. So I got a bowl. I put some flour and some milk in it. I don't know why. It was messy, but I just did. And so I just gave her a spoon and I said, stir this. What's it for? Because I don't know how to bake. That's what she told me. I'm like, no, this is going to be for I had to make it up, but I said, this is going to be for the chicken enchiladas. You don't put flour and milk in chicken enchiladas. I know, but it's a recipe I'm trying. It's like a casserole. She said, okay. I made it up. So she just stirred and 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 kept stirring. And finally she said, okay, I don't want to stir anymore. And then I said, okay. I said, let me bring it over here and I'll put it in the oven. And I hope she never watched me, and she didn't. And that was it. And then she was done. And she was ready to eat dinner. So that's what she needed. And to be in the kitchen for my mother and our family, and for a lot of families, you hang out in the kitchen. That's where you hang out. That's your place where you talk and solve world problems. And to them, giving them something to do like that that's safe It's not going to hurt them unless they're eating stuff, because sometimes they get to a point where they're eating stuff they shouldn't be eating. Then for the most part, you can go ahead and switch to something like that. And for men, sometimes figure out where they like to hang out, that generation, or where he liked to hang out, in the backyard, in the garage, in the living room, and give them something to do that kind of reflects that for them. Sometimes they look at the paper and you know they can't read it, but they love the newspaper. Every morning for 65 or 70 or 75 years, he or she read the newspaper at the breakfast table. Give them the paper. Just do it. Just kind of give them the things that they can feel to still remove some of those losses that they've experienced. I'm getting confused with which one to use. I'll have to quit doing that. This wandering, concealed memory losses. Remember, sleep disturbance, losing and hiding things. You know what? You're going to have to kind of deal with some of that, because it's important for them to be able to put stuff up and just let them do it. Just try to keep track of where it all is. You're going to find all kinds of stuff. I was just telling somebody earlier, my mom was starting to put meat, when she lived by herself at the end, she was putting meat from H-E-B that was frozen in the closet. And I could smell it. And we looked and looked and looked, and it was in her closet in one of her bedrooms. And she had other stuff in there too. It was just unbelievable. She had 4 bird houses from the same company she had bought on TV. 4 bird houses, the same bird houses. I mean, you know, those kind of things happen. Inappropriate sexual behaviors. How many of you, the person you're caring for, I shouldn't ask you because that's a different topic, different seminar, after hours. We're talking about the person that you're caring for. How many of you are starting to see some of these behaviors? Anyone yet? A little bit? You may or may not see some of these, but we do actually, Alzheimer's Association provides education. We've talked about this before, so something that you're likely to more see in maybe nursing homes, or kind of toward the end stages, not end, but moderate stages. I talked about some of this cause, this is another thing that I kind of figured out. A lot of times, this is wandering, I just like this camel thing, this guy wandering thing, but I kind of started thinking about the boredom, but also there's fear. They've got to be scared when they don't recognize more than half the people that walk into that house anymore. And sometimes don't recognize you after you walk to the bedroom and then come back. So I remind caregivers to just remind when you've been gone for like 5 minutes or more, depending on the person, and just say, kind of give them some idea to remember who you are, or if there's someone coming in before they come back blasting through the door, for them to tell who they are. And then also, remember when it starts to get dark or there's something that they're fearful of, you're going to see this fear, and it's going to trigger some of this agitated behavior or anxiety or excessive crying or whatever it is that you're going to see. So just for you to be aware of. And also the hunger can be part of it. And I'm not saying that you're not feeding them. But people have their little habits when they're eating. I mean, those are kind of some of the things you have to think about too. I mean, you might be feeding him 3 meals a day, but maybe he liked to have like a handful of peanuts at night. Cut up an apple. Make sure that talk to the doctor, make sure that they're getting those snacks. Anything that kind of can reduce some of that agitation that you're going to see if you don't take care of some of these things. So, you like that little dog right there? It's cute, right? So, common behavioral symptoms, repeating questions. We talked about that a little bit already. But I think it's, to me, when I talk to caregivers individually, and I tell them, what's bothering you the most? They're like the questions over and over and over again. And I wish there was something I could tell you to do to stop it, besides putting earplugs in your ear and pretending like it's not happening. And I wish there was something scientific or something professional advice that I could give you for that. Except the only thing you can do is to learn how to manage it yourself. And that's the kind of things that you don't really probably want to hear. It's like, oh, why didn't you just tell me something that was going to work and I could go home and try it like right now? But I do want you to try that little robot trick that I talked about, because I do see it working for my mother. When you introduce it back to her or him, it kind of will help them get away from that, because they really are looking for an answer to their question. So something back here can happen to make that maybe be a little bit different, or bring something else in front of them that would get their attention, and maybe that'll help them quit doing those questions too. Try what it's going to be different for everyone. Remember, we all are dealing with people with different personalities. Sometimes they get very territorial. How many of you experience this? Especially if they're still living at home or they're living by themselves. They're very, that's mine, that's my money, that's my shirt, those are my dishes. Whatever the situation's going to be, let them be territorial. What's it going to do? I know, Mom, I know this is yours. It's not mine. What is that telling you when I talk like that and I start saying like that? What is my voice telling you? That I am about to have had enough of this, and thank God there's not a cliff in my backyard, because I'm getting ready to run for it and jump off. You know, you don't, the thing is, it's so interesting to me how we try to get an irrational person who has no control over what they're doing. It's not a teenager. And actually, they don't have control either. Because I saw this study the other day that said that their frontal lobe is not fully developed until they're in their 20s. So really, they're like still out of it. They don't know what they're doing, but you can't tell them that. I heard this talk the other day where this guy said, my daughter knows everything. She's 15. There's nothing she doesn't know. I'm going to call NASA, because they should hire her. She knows everything. So go get a job with NASA. Hallucinations, delusions, illusions. Now, this is when you start to get to a point where you're going to have to see a physician if these things start to happen, because you can medicate, not a lot of medication. These are actually true psychotic behaviors. This is a diagnosis and needs to be treated by a geriatric psychiatrist. And let me just say something right now. In my 18 plus years in working with this population, one of the best things you can do for yourself and the person you're caring for is to have them see a geriatrician. Not your family doctor. Unless he or she is a geriatrician. Now they're going to tell you, I can do the same thing the geriatrician is doing, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's a big difference. There's a huge difference. And there's good geriatricians out there, and there's bad ones. Just like there's good medical doctors and there's bad ones. You're going to have to find the one that works for you. Get a complete and total checkup with that geriatrician, and maybe he or she will refer them to a neuropsychologist or to a neurologist to get a baseline of understanding of where this person is at and where they're at mentally and where their brain is at and what's going on. The more you know, the more you can handle. I'm not saying it's going to make you feel better. And I'm not going to say that all of a sudden you're going to turn into Mother Teresa. I don't know why she's on my mind today. She just is. I'm using her a lot. So that I'm not going to say that you're going to turn into Mother Teresa, but it's going to help you to understand that a little bit further. Also, I wanted to mention, now I'm going to skip we already talked about that. I wanted to mention some of these things regarding self-assessment and kind of managing some of your own behaviors. Because I know that we don't always mean those things. I mean, sometimes you just turn around and you just feel like crying, or you do start crying and you try not to let them see that you're crying. I mean, those kind of things happen to us too, because you're so upset and you're trying to manage this behavior. And the one thing I think is, like I mentioned, if you understand the condition, you understand what can happen from it, just like coming to things like you are today and keeping in contact with the Alzheimer Association and doing everything that you can to be on top of it and to your knowledge to be in place too. The amount of knowledge you need to have regarding this, the better you're going to do. But also understanding your triggers and the kind of help and responding to the resources you need. So think the situation through instead of being emotional. Now, I have that up there because I think it's a joke. And the reason I think it's a joke is because it's much easier said than done. Because I think sometimes you need to know that it is okay for you to be upset. Have you ever met those people who constantly smile through everything? And their voice is like this, and they're so happy to see you, and life is wonderful. And yes, I'm taking care of both my parents who have Alzheimer's in my home, and they're just, it's lovely. God has blessed me with all of this beautiful life, and you know that at any moment, she's going to shoot up something. That at any moment now, 10 police cars are going to be surrounding her house. You know that because we are human beings and we have feelings and we have emotions and we have bad days and we feel sometimes that our lives are going to fall apart. And you need to give yourself permission. Years ago when I was in grad school, we had to go to therapy as part of one of our classes. We had to go to 8 sessions. And my therapist said to me, she said, I said, I'm not really that stressed out. Obviously, she could tell I was. And she said, I want you to do something. I want you to take this tennis racket. And she said, I want you to take it and I want you to go over to that couch and I just want you to hit it 10 times. Hit it however you want. So I got the tennis racket and I hit it. I was like, well, let me just tell you, by the time I finished with that couch, I'm like, okay, I'm stressed. I just really beat that couch up. You just never go and figure out what you can do to release that stress. You know what you need to release that stress. Wink, wink, whatever it is. Go and do it a bunch of times. Whatever it takes. Don't quit doing that just because you're a caregiver. Even if you got to take 5 minutes in the garage in the car, just like you were in high school. Go do it. Whatever it takes. I don't care. I mean, I'll walk down the street, go see a movie, go to the gym, whatever you want. I'd rather go to the garage than the gym, but I mean, go and do whatever it is you think you need to do for yourself that will relieve that stress and do it. I think I'm almost done here, right? So, I got 2 minutes. Beware of your body posture too, and I don't mean that from like, that sit up straight thing, although that's important too, I've heard. But be aware of your body posture in regards to that defensive mode that you put the person in, and also your size, like, keep the size to yourself. Please keep the size to yourself. And then all the, they can hear you. They can hear you, and although they don't figure it out, they can sense that something's not quite right. You've got to try to keep that all at an even keel. Unresolved conflicts can affect your patients or your care, whoever the person is you're caring for. Those unresolved issues you have from the past, please start to take care of those. Because as much as we would love to have lived in a world where all the moms and dads and grandpas were perfect, they're not. Some of you may have been in a relationship with those parents that was not a pleasant relationship growing up for whatever reasons. Find somebody to talk to and deal with that. And you may not be the best person, not because you're not a good person, you may not be the best person to take care of that person because of who that person was to you in your past. You have to have the realization of that as well. Okay? I'll be back at 2:30, so thank you all for your time. We'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Dr. Lozano, I know you'll be back, but we want to present to you now a little token of our appreciation for your knowledge and your expressing everything you've done for us. Just thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Okay, who's hungry? Okay, our next speaker is Kitty. Lunchtime. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna line up against the wall, the back wall, and then we're gonna go and get the plates, and then lastly get the drinks. So nobody ever crowded at once, just form a line, and we'll serve you as quickly as possible, and we will start again at 1:35. Thank you.
I will do like a small presentation, just some resources. That's it.
Also, while we're having the break, the Alzheimer's Association is going to give a small presentation on the resources that are available. So please stay tuned for that.